Hello, hello, hello. This is Reverend Karen coming at you from Fearlessly Feral Living. And today's episode is titled, Things a Car Wash Taught Me. And I just want to give you a heads up that this episode is going to be a bit longer than my normal 20 to 25 minutes. I tried to edit it down, guys, but there's just too much stuff to learn from a car wash. But first, let me do my introduction. Welcome to Fearlessly Feral Living, broadcasting to you from the Woogie Ranch, out here in the back 40 of northwestern Nevada, where I'm a half an hour away from the nearest gas station and grocery store. Our mission is to teach practical application of science of mind principles to provide a strong and unshakable inner foundation that facilitates long-term, successful living. So I'm going to put something new in this podcast, and it'll be from this point onward in every podcast. At the beginning of the podcast, I'm going to talk about which spiritual practices and principles I'm going to illustrate in the podcast. And then there'll be a story about how to apply them in your daily life. So today, practices, you get introspection and connection, and principles, you get oneness and love. So here we are at the car wash. Something happened a while back as I took my car through a car wash. It was profound and illuminating. And what happened afterwards was even so much more fun. So here's the story. This car wash was a new one in town. And in going through it, I discovered that apparently today's car washes ain't your mama's car washes. Gone, apparently, are the days of a car wash being this place where you moved through and it was sort of ho-hum with windows on both sides and they just washed your car and then you left. No, these days, the car wash is more like an amusement park ride. This particular car wash, anyway, you enter through a dark tunnel, and it's a dark tunnel. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I get myself into here? It's a dark tunnel. It's kind of a metaphor, for the hero's journey. We go into this dark tunnel. Anyway, I go into this dark tunnel, and it's really, really dark. And then the car wash starts up. And all of a sudden, I've got all these really bountiful and plentiful suds on my windshield. And then they start changing colors. And then they start dripping down the windshield. And I've got this beautiful kaleidoscope of color and motion and movement in my car. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so cool. And I found myself wanting to take pictures of it all. So I grab my cell phone and I start taking pictures, and I zoom in and I zoom out and I turn different angles and I lean over so I can get different pictures of this car wash. And the entire car wash experience was an exercise in being fully present in the moment. All my day's activities were forgotten. Everything I had been thinking about was put on hold, and I just had a Zen experience in that car wash. And it's been years since that happened. Not since the Zen experience happened. I have those all the time. No, it's been years since I was moved to willy-nilly just pick up a camera, even if it was only the cell phone, because I was in a Zen zone and I wanted to capture what was happening before me. See, that joy went away a while back. It went away when something happened in my life that was so life-changing and catastrophic and profound. And I got so disillusioned and disappointed and angry. And that desire, that joy that I got in just simply taking photos willy-nilly of what was going on in front of me, simply because for the sheer joy of it, that went away. And it went away as a result of change and loss. Now, don't we have change and loss in our life on a regular basis? We all do. And don't we get disillusioned and disappointed and angry as a result of those changes and losses? Yeah, we all do. The point here, and this is the real topic of discussion for this podcast, the point is, what do we do when we get disillusioned and disappointed and angry? We get to take a look at this stuff, guys. We don't get to just sit in it and be there and continue to be disillusioned and disappointed and angry. We've got to process this stuff if we want to live fearlessly feral. If you don't want to live fearlessly feral, then just live with it. But I want to live fearlessly feral. So we get to explore what we do with that stuff. And I'm here to tell you that if we don't explore it, that disappointment and that disillusionment and that anger turns into cynicism and distrust. And then things start happening, like we start experiencing chronic illness. Or we start experiencing, we don't want to leave the house. We become hermits. We start experiencing a lack of trust of our fellow human being. We start experiencing stuff like that. Or we tell ourselves, well, I'm never going to do that again. And so we start experiencing limitation. But if we process it and we take care of it and we go through the dark tunnel, then we begin to experience all that beautiful light and color. And we come out the other end nice and bright and shiny and clean. So how do we do that? Because I've got news for you. If we experience a catastrophic change in our life and we get disillusioned and disappointed and angry and we refuse to deal with it, we refuse to process it, we don't deal with the grief and the loss and the anger and all the other stuff that we go through, the same thing is going to keep happening over and over and over again until we finally get it. Now, the circumstances will change, but the feelings won't. So how do we deal with this stuff? How do we go through the dark tunnel and emerge all bright and shiny and clean? Here's how we do that. The spiritual practices are introspection and connection, and the principles are oneness and love. Here's a little bit more about that. We go within. That's introspection. We explore, and we do so willingly and with courage because we are connected. That's another principle. We are connected with that which gives us strength and power. I don't care what you call it, by the way, whatever that is for you. We use oneness, oneness that we get from that connection, to realize that if we are feeling this, other people are too. We're not alone. We can use love as both our goal and our foundation. Because I don't know about you, but when shit happens and I get disillusioned and disappointed, I usually lose faith as well. I don't like that feeling of having lost faith. Because when I lose faith, I've also lost love. Which means I'm in fear. And you know me, my mission in life is to live fearlessly feral. So here we are. I do the work. I go through the tunnel. I enter into the darkness. And I come out the other end bright and shiny and clean. So here's how you do that. If you're willing, fight this stuff and you'll stay stuck. Embrace it and go through the tunnel and you'll experience a life greater than you ever dreamed of. So a little background on this photography thing. For 30 years, I made an extraordinarily successful living at a photography business, but I didn't just do photography. I was photography. It was my whole sense of identity. I was quite successful at it, and I had learned to hide behind a camera at a very early age. And this is big, guys. This is huge. I just had this realization in writing this podcast out. I realized that I had spent my entire life hiding behind a camera, because in doing so, I could observe the life around me and I could capture it and I could be just a little itty bitty part of it, but I didn't have to become actively involved. And that was a safe place for me, because if I became actively involved, I was going to get hurt. Unfortunately, that's how my early life started out. I never realized that. I never realized that for all those years I was taking pictures and enjoying it so thoroughly was that I was hiding behind the camera and thus preventing myself from having the deep, deep relationships that today I long for. So I asked for this, guys. I asked for this. So I've had this realization. This is the things we can learn in the car wash. the metaphorical car wash, if we're willing to go through that dark tunnel and do that exploration and that processing and do all that stuff that I universally across the board hear people tell me, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing my grief work. Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing it. I'm like, dudes, if you want to live fearlessly feral, this is the way to do it. So, I'm retired from photography, not by choice, guys, not by choice. I fought and kicked and screamed that every step of the way. I did not let go gracefully. I fought it and fought it and fought it with everything I had. And I'm laughing at myself now because, Ernest Holmes tells us that what we resist persists. And my anger and my disillusionment and my disappointment at what happened in the photography industry continued until I stopped fighting it. I guess, in a way, this is what they call surrender in Christianity. I just knew I needed to do my inner work, and I knew I was sick and tired of feeling sick and tired about this whole thing. And so here I am today. And today I feel whole. Today, as of this morning, when I'm working on this podcast, I have this realization that for my entire life, I'm hiding behind a camera to keep myself from having true, close, deep relationships with other people. And I got to tell you, that's such a revelation, such a revelation. So we do what we need to in life to survive. And that was what I needed to do to survive. But then there comes a time when we have these awarenesses and we realize that we can't do that anymore. Not if we want to progress in life. Not if we want to live fearlessly feral. Not if we want to experience more joy and more happiness and more wholeness and more peace in our life. The easier, softer way is to work through this stuff, not deny it. Don't refuse to do your grief work, guys. I got news for you. If you start crying, you will be able to stop eventually. When you stop, you'll be tired and it'll be time to take a nap. And you do that. And then you come out the other end, maybe not totally bright and shiny and squeaky clean because there's more work to do after the good cry, but it's a beginning. The easier, softer way is to work through this stuff. So I'm getting back to the point where I'm starting to enjoy picking up a camera just willy-nilly, simply because I want to, simply because I experience joy from it, not because I'm hiding behind my camera, not because of any of that other stuff. So I go through this car wash and it's just such a profound and exciting moment. And I decide to write a podcast episode about it. And I realized that it's another metaphor, not of the hero's journey, which is a great metaphor, but it's also a metaphor for being willing to examine things from a different perspective in our life. And being willing to experience a shift in our perceptions. So I did this fun little exercise on Facebook. I posted a picture, one of those pictures that I took in that car wash. I posted it on Facebook and I asked people to guess what it was. And I got so many cool answers. Here they are. Annie's tongue. Annie's my dog. How cool is that? A fire reflection. Reflection of auto lights in rainwater. Reflection off of ice. Boat on water. Paint on tinfoil. I want to try that, by the way. I want to try painting on tinfoil. Tail lights of a flatbed truck in rain. And the specificity of that one really made me smile. A rain puddle reflecting neon building lights. Boat on fire. Reflection of wet tinfoil. One person turned the image upside down and said she saw critters. Cranberry jelly. Barbecue on wet pavement. And as I'm looking through all these responses, I'm realizing there are some commonalities in those. Reflection. We look at what we see in our own mirror because that's more about us than what's going on out there. And a lot of water stuff, a lot of water. These folks were going outside their box a little bit, trying to figure out what this picture was. And I got news for you. If you're willing to go outside your own self-limiting ways of thinking and perceiving things and look at things in a different way, for something as simple as trying to identify a photo of something that really isn't identifiable, you can do it in other areas of your life. Because how we do one thing is how we do everything. So if you can shift your perception about something as simple as a photo on Facebook, you can shift your perception about other things. So for those of you who responded to that Facebook post, yahoo for you, because you went outside your box. And I hope you continued that to shift your perception in other areas. So I'm over here going willy-nilly and very innocently through a car wash, and I'm thinking about the metaphor of the hero's journey and going through the dark tunnel and coming out all shiny and squeaky clean. And then I'm thinking about the metaphor of being able to experience joy at photography and knowing that I've come a long way, baby, from all the disillusionment and the disappointment that I've experienced. And I'm writing this podcast, and then I have this spiritual awakening that said, I've been hiding behind a camera my whole life to prevent me from having the deepest, closest relationships with people that I can possibly have. This is all stuff I learned from the car wash, guys. All stuff I learned from the car wash. And it's all because I was willing to do introspection and connection and experience love and oneness as a result of those practices. So here's a process. I just want to give you a little bit of process for this so you can start to do this yourself. And again, sometimes we want to say, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to do my grief work? Why would I want to shift my thinking? Why would I want to change my thinking? Why would I want to change a belief? Because, guys, you're a choice. You can either change and experience something greater and live fearlessly feral, or not. It is your choice. We can stay where we are, or we can grow and experience a more beautiful life than we ever dreamed possible. If you choose to stay where you're at, I guarantee things won't get any easier. You'll continue to experience frustration and despair and a loss in faith because of it. Because I got news for you. All that shit that happens out there that causes us all this disillusionment and disappointment and despair and anger and all that other achy stuff, if we don't take care of it the first time it happens, guess what? It's going to happen over and over and over again. The circumstances might change, but our feelings will not. We need to look at this stuff, guys. I hope you have the willingness to do this. This is what I call fearlessly feral living, when they have the willingness to enter into that dark tunnel, knowing full well that when we come out the other end, we're going to be all bright and shiny and squeaky clean. So let's say we do make the choice. We decide we're going to do this. We're going to enter the tunnel. What's next? We take that same willingness that we used to try and identify a photo which was basically unidentifiable, and we apply it to other things in our life. We look at any examples in our life where we might be agitated. And by agitated, I mean upset or frustrated or angry, in tears, confused, bothered, offended, fearful, and frustrated. In other words, the feelings are so upsetting that we can't operate effectively in life. That's agitated. I also refer to it as activated sometimes. So let's say something happens and we're agitated. Instead of remaining agitated, be willing to take a look at it from a different perspective. Now, this doesn't happen right away, guys. It does not happen right away. It's a process. We've got to grieve. We've got to accept the agitation. We've got to accept and embrace the upsetness and the frustration and the anger. We've got to allow ourselves to cry. We have to allow ourselves to be confused and all hot and bothered and offended and fearful and frustrated. We've got to allow ourselves to feel all of that stuff, because what we resist persists, and if we don't allow ourselves to feel it, it's going to stick around. So we feel it. It's not going to last forever. And then when we come out the other end, kind of drained and tired and empty, then we get to start looking at things from a different perspective. Then we're in this beautiful place of creativity. We're in the creative process, folks, because then we get to sit down and envision what we want our life to look like instead. Because we're open now. We're willing. We've let go. We've released a lot of that stuff. And there's some traps that I want to warn you of when you go through this process. Anytime, every time, no exceptions, you are speaking in the third person, you are staying in the problem. And by speaking in the third person, I mean him or her, she or he, they or them. That's all third person stuff, guys. And any time we are speaking in the third person, we are staying in the problem. Anytime we're blaming them or they or he or she, we're in the problem. So we can't allow ourselves to do that. This is our work. It's our own inner work. We can't do anything about them. It really is true what Don Miguel Ruiz said in the 4 Agreements, that everything that happens in our lives, we have to go within. We have to go within. And that what they say or do really has nothing to do with us, except in our reaction to it. And that's what we get to do, look at. We get to look at our reactions to it. So we get to ask ourselves these questions. I'm agitated because I feel, and then you fill in the blank. And I got news for you again. I've said this before. Feelings are not thoughts. If you find yourself saying, I'm agitated because I think such and such, no, that's just expressing an opinion, guys. I'm agitated because I feel angry. I feel disappointed. I feel disillusioned. So we go into the feelings of it and we acknowledge those feelings. It's the only way they're going to pass through us. We acknowledge them. We ask ourselves, what am I feeling right now? And then we ask ourselves, am I afraid of anything as a result of what I'm thinking? We might ask ourselves, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen if what I'm afraid of comes to fruition? Then we ask ourselves, what's the best thing that could possibly happen if what I'm afraid of comes to fruition? And then we might ask ourselves, what's the most likely thing that could possibly happen if what I'm afraid of comes to fruition? Is what I'm feeling trying to tell me something? If so, what? And remember, we need to stay in our own lane, not anybody else's. You know, when you go through that tunnel in the car wash, you don't pass the guy in front of you. You don't let the guy behind you bump into you. There's nowhere else to go. You're in your own lane. Do that. Don't talk about them. Every time you talk about them, you're creating more victimhood for yourself. Stay in the solution, not the problem. We do our grief work when we enter this tunnel. And by that we mean I simply allow those feelings. Because if you don't, those feelings are going to get stuck inside of you forever and ever and ever. And I got news for you. Those festering feelings, they result in illness, both physical and mental. You might be afraid, as I said before, that if you let yourself cry, you'll never stop. I got news for you. I felt that way after my husband died. If I let myself cry, I'm never, ever, ever going to stop. I finally had to let myself cry, and I stopped eventually. And again, then we nap, then we take a nap, then we rest. And then we start to emerge through the tunnel and we're all bright and shiny and clean. And then we get to decide what we're going to do with all that bright and shiny, clean newness. And then the joy begins to come back. And then we begin to create something new in our life. And it's so beautiful and it's so wonderful. And we wonder, what the hell took me so long? It just takes what it takes, guys. It really does. Because it's a process, and the process is different for every one of us. And then the questions begin to get different. We ask ourselves things like, what do I want my life to look like in a year, in 5 years, or in 10? And then we get to furnish that puppy. We get to go big. There used to be a time about 10 or 15 years ago when vision boards were all the rage. Vision board workshops were all the rage. And you'd show up to this place and they'd have 18,000 magazines sitting there and scissors and glue and all sorts of little things you could stick, and they'd have a blank board. And we'd go through those magazines and we'd cut out pictures of things we envisioned for our life, and we'd paste them on that board, and we might put words on the board, and we might put pretty little stars and glittery things on the board, and we come out of this little process, this workshop, with a vision board that we'd come home and put somewhere in our home where we could see it regularly to remind ourselves of what it is we're really going for in life. You could still do that, by the way. Vision board workshops are fun. You just need to have a whole bunch of magazines. Or you can print down, you can download photos from the internet now. So you can do this. However you do it, you get to envision what you want your life to be like. And you get to furnish it. And you get to think about it. And you get to affirm it. And you get to know it. And always, 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 there's something there that is providing us. That's something, that God thing, whatever you want to call it. There's something there that's providing us with the wisdom and the strength and the clarity to march confidently in the direction of our dreams, I can't remember his name, what he used to say. We march confidently in the direction of our dreams. See what happens when I go off script? Then I can't remember, and then I make a fool out of myself. But it's true. We march confidently in the direction of our dreams. And we go within, we connect with that thing, and that allows us to be that confidence. Not do it, be it, feel it. And we have that strength, and we have that clarity and that wisdom, and we know. And when we're doing this process, we're open enough to say this or something better. This or something better. Because sometimes we never know what that something better could be. And by being open, we prepare ourselves to receive something better. I certainly never would have purposely created a vision board with me living in the back 40 of northern Nevada on 2.5 acres of land with these great views and this night sky that has very little light pollution, so I can see the Milky Way with the naked eye. And my horses are living here on my property with me, just a few steps away from my back door. I never dreamed that one day I would come to understand that I spent much of my life hiding behind a camera to prevent myself from having deep relationships with other people. I would take it so far and then stop it. I certainly never would have been able to even think that I would come to this realization years later after going through that hero's journey through that tunnel. I go through that tunnel quite a bit. The thing is, today I know it's safe to do so. It is safe for us to go through that tunnel. It is safe for us to go within. Everything that we experience in our life is an invitation, a giant invitation to go within. So to wrap it all up, we explore what's inside of us. We do our grief work and we begin to heal and imagine and play with what could be in our life. And then we become ready to move outward into the world. And we do what is ours to do because we have clarity and we know what's ours to do. And that, my folks, is what I learned from one little itty bitty trip through a car wash. And I thank you very much for listening. And I am affirming Fearlessly Feral Living for you. Fearlessly Feral Living is a focused ministry of Centers for Spiritual Living, and your support is much appreciated and fully tax deductible. And I'm happy to report that you can support this podcast in so many ways. You can support the podcast on Buzzsprout. There's a little clickable link there. If you go to Buzzsprout to listen to this podcast, you'll see it. You can support by going to our Patreon page, Fearlessly Feral, on Patreon. You can support by donating on our PayPal page, and that's under my name, Karen Lindsley. And you can find all these ways to support and much, much more good, yummy stuff at fearlesslyferal.org. And once again, I thank you very much for listening, and I am knowing Fearlessly Feral Living for you and for me.